In the small, quiet town of San Martin, where all the neighbors knew each other, lived the Perez family. They were a seemingly perfect family, respected and admired for their lifestyle. Luis Perez, the father, was a man of strict principles and strong character, while his wife, Veronica, was known for her sweetness and devotion to her daughters, Camila and Valeria. The 20-year-old twins not only shared stunning looks, but also a connection that transcended the ordinary. Since they were little, they had been inseparable, and their bond seemed stronger than that of any other pair of sisters. Camila and Valeria were identical in every way. They both had long, dark hair, almond-shaped eyes, and a smile that disarmed anyone. However, their personalities were slightly different. While Camila was more outgoing and determined, Valeria was shy and thoughtful. This balance made them complement each other perfectly. Since they were children, their relationship had been an example of brotherly love, but when they reached adolescence, something changed. What was once an innocent connection began to transform into something more complex and difficult to handle. Luis, a former military man accustomed to order and discipline, was the type of man who valued family traditions. To him, the twins represented the pride of the family, and he hoped they would grow up to become successful women with strong principles. Although he loved his daughters, his relationship with them was distant. He did not know how to handle the emotional aspects of parenthood, and he usually delegated that role to Veronica. Veronica, on the other hand, was the family's mediator. She was a loving and protective mother, always attentive to the needs of her daughters. Her love for them was unconditional, although at times she noticed a connection between Camila and Valeria that she found difficult to understand. However, she never questioned their relationship, attributing their closeness to the natural bond between twins. From the age of 16, Camila and Valeria began to notice changes in their relationship. The nightly conversations, which used to revolve around their dreams and future plans, began to include more personal and intimate topics. On one such night, while talking about romantic relationships, Valeria confessed that she had never felt an emotional connection with anyone other than her sister. "It's like no one else can understand me like you do," she said, while nervously playing with her hair. Camila, instead of laughing or changing the subject, nodded. She felt the same way, although she didn't know how to put it into words. From that moment on, their conversations began to take on a different tone. The glances lasted longer than usual, and the hugs, although innocent in appearance, were charged with an emotion that both tried to ignore. The first episode that marked a significant change in their relationship occurred during a family trip to the beach. While their parents were resting, Camila and Valeria decided to explore the surroundings. At one point, while they were alone in a secluded cove, Camila took Valeria's hand and looked into her eyes. "Have you ever felt that what we have is different?" Camila asked quietly. Valeria didn't know what to answer. She knew exactly what her sister meant, but the fear of the unknown paralyzed her. Instead of speaking, she simply nodded. That moment was etched in their minds, and although neither of them mentioned it afterwards, they both knew that something had changed between them. As the months passed, the attraction between the twins became more evident, at least for them. They tried to ignore it, focusing on their studies and social activities, but the tension was still latent. During the nights, when they shared a room, they would often stay up late, talking and laughing as always. However, those conversations often ended in awkward silences, filled with thoughts that neither of them dared to express. The first physical contact beyond the fraternal occurred accidentally. One night, while Valeria was trying to comfort Camila after an argument with her father, a hug turned into something more. Their faces were dangerously close, and before they could stop themselves, their lips touched. They both immediately separated, horrified by what had just happened. "This can't happen," Valeria said, her voice shaking. "I know," Camila replied, avoiding her gaze. They decided to pretend that nothing had happened, but the incident marked a before and after in their relationship. From then on, the tension between them was palpable, and although they tried to keep up appearances in front of their parents, it was increasingly difficult for them to control what they felt. The changes in the twins' relationship began to affect their daily lives. Camila, who had always been outgoing and sociable, began to avoid her friends. Valeria, for her part, became even more withdrawn. They spent almost all their time together, making up excuses not to leave the house. Luis and Veronica noticed these changes, but attributed them to the pressure of school and the typical phases of adolescence. "It's normal that they are so close. They are twins," Veronica said, trying to calm herself down. However, There were times when even she couldn't ignore the strangeness of their relationship. One afternoon, while she was preparing dinner, she heard the twins laughing in their room. Although she smiled at first, when she paid more attention she noticed a tone in their laughter that she couldn't explain. It was as if they shared a secret that no one else was supposed to know. Camila and Valeria knew that what they felt was wrong. Guilt and fear tormented them constantly. They tried to distance themselves, but every time they did, the feeling of emptiness was unbearable. It was as if they were destined to be together, even if it meant risking everything. One night, while their parents were in the living room watching television, the twins decided to talk about what was happening. "We can't go on like this," Valeria said, tears in her eyes. "This is going to destroy us." "But I can't imagine myself without you either," Camila replied, taking her hand. They both knew there was no easy solution. Breaking up wasn't an option, but continuing their relationship wasn't either. They were trapped in an impossible situation, and with each passing day, the tension increased. The Perez family went about their daily lives, never imagining that a storm was brewing inside them. Camila and Valeria lived in a constant state of paranoia, fearing that their parents would discover their secret. However, what they didn't know was that the real disaster was just around the corner. One afternoon, while Luis was fixing something in the garden and Veronica went out to do some shopping, the twins felt safe enough to throw their caution to the wind. They thought they had plenty of time before someone came back, but they underestimated how quickly Veronica was doing her chores. When Veronica entered the house, she heard noises coming from the twins' room. Puzzled, she went upstairs and opened the door without warning. What she saw left her speechless. Veronica's accidental discovery had been like a bolt of lightning that split her world in two. When she opened the door to her daughter's room and saw them together like that, something inside her broke. She ran out of the house without saying a word, tears rolling down her cheeks and her mind in chaos. She couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. Her instinct was to protect them, but at the same time she couldn't deny that what she had seen defied all the moral and social norms she knew. Camila and Valeria were petrified after the incident. They knew that their mother had discovered them, but they didn't know how to deal with the situation. The tension in the house was palpable, and for the next few days, no one mentioned what had happened. However, for the twins, that moment marked a point of no return. Despite the fear and guilt, Camila and Valeria couldn't stop themselves. Their connection had become more than just a sisterly bond. It was an obsession that consumed them all. They tried to keep up appearances in front of their parents, but in the privacy of their room, everything was different. Their encounters became more frequent and less controlled. They took advantage of any opportunity to be together. When Veronica went out shopping, when Luis worked in the garden, or even during the nights, when everyone was asleep. Each encounter was a mix of passion, guilt, and fear, but the adrenaline of being discovered only seemed to intensify their desire. One night, while they were together in their room, Valeria broke the silence. "Do you think Mom will tell Dad?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. Camila shook her head, although she wasn't entirely sure. "I don't think she will. But we have to be more careful. We can't let it happen again." However, they both knew that her words were just an illusion of control. Their relationship had reached a point where they couldn't stop, even if they wanted to. Meanwhile, Veronica was trying to process what had happened. Although she hadn't said anything to Luis, her behavior changed drastically. She avoided the twins as much as she could and barely spoke to them. When she was alone with them, her gaze was a mix of sadness and disapproval, although she never directly mentioned what she had seen. Luis, for his part, noticed that something strange was happening in the house. His wife was more distant, and the twins seemed closer than ever. However, he had no idea what was really going on. "Is everything okay?" he asked one night, while they were having dinner in silence. "Yes, everything is okay," Veronica answered quickly, avoiding her gaze. But Luis wasn't convinced. He decided to take a closer look at his family, suspecting that something wasn't right. For the twins, life had become a constant state of paranoia. Although they tried to act normal, they were always on the verge of discovery. Every glance from her mother, every comment from her father, every moment someone knocked on her bedroom door was a threat. Despite this, they couldn't stop. Their obsession was too strong, too intense. Every clandestine encounter was like a drug that kept them connected, even though they knew they were playing with fire. "I can't keep living with this fear," Valeria said one night, while they were both lying together. "Me neither," Camila replied, but I don't know what else to do." They both knew their relationship was destined to be discovered, but neither of them was willing to separate. The breaking point came one afternoon, when Luis decided to confront his family. He had been watching the twins for weeks, noticing small details he couldn't ignore. The way they looked at each other, how they were always together, and how they avoided talking about their personal lives. Finally, he decided to look for answers. While Veronica was out, Luis called the twins into the living room. "I want you to explain to me what's going on between you two," he said, with an authoritative tone. Camila and Valeria looked at each other nervously, not knowing what to say. They tried to pretend they didn't understand the question, but Luis didn't give them time. "Don't lie to me. I know something isn't right." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Camila decided to speak. "Dad, it's not what you think. So what is it?" Luis interrupted, his voice full of fury. Valeria tried to intervene, but Luis didn't want to hear excuses. He stood up suddenly, slamming his fist on the table. "This ends today. I'm not going to let something like this continue in this house." The twins froze. They knew their secret was out in the open and there was no turning back. After the confrontation, Luis ordered the twins to stay apart. He forced them to sleep in different rooms and forbade them from spending time together unsupervised. Veronica, though devastated by the situation, didn't object. She knew Luis was acting out of anger, but she didn't have the strength to face him either. For Camila and Valeria, the separation was unbearable. They had spent their entire lives together, sharing everything, and now they found themselves isolated from each other. Every night was torture, and every day they felt more desperate. "I can't stand this," Camila said one night, as she spoke to Valeria through the closed door of her room. "Me neither, but I don't know what to do," Valeria answered, tears in her eyes. They both knew that their situation was unsustainable, but they didn't see a way out. Finally, the twins decided to take control of their situation. They planned to escape together, leaving their parents and their life in San Martin behind. They wanted to start over in a place where no one knew them, where they could be themselves without fear of judgment or condemnation. For weeks, they secretly prepared their plan. They saved money, packed their things, and waited for the right moment to flee. However, Luis, who continued to watch them closely, suspected that something was happening. One night, he decided to intervene before it was too late. Luis, full of fury and determined to save his family, came up with a plan that would change their lives forever. Luis's plan began to take shape in his mind as a desperate act of protection. In his mind, distorted by anger and prejudice, he was convinced that he had to do what was necessary to restore what he considered to be the honor of his family. He knew that the twins were planning to escape, and that only intensified his determination. He could not allow them to take his family name with them to a life that he believed would dishonor everything he had built. One night, while Veronica was away visiting her sister, Luis decided to act. He had been keeping a close eye on the twins and knew that they were planning to make their escape that night. He found them in the basement, where they had hidden a small suitcase with their essential belongings. Camila and Valeria, upon seeing him appear, froze. They knew their father would not let them go without a fight, but they were not prepared for what was coming. "So you were planning to escape?" Luis asked, with a calm that was more terrifying than any shout. "Dad, this is not what you think," Valeria tried to explain, but Luis interrupted her with a gesture. "You have nothing to say to me. I've done everything for you, and this is how you repay me." Camila, braver, stepped forward. "You can't control us all our lives. This isn't something we can change." Those words seemed to light a spark in Luis. He pulled out a gun he had kept hidden and pointed it directly at them. "If I can't change how you feel, at least I can stop you from destroying this family." Valeria stood in front of Camila, trying to protect her. "Dad, please don't do this," she pleaded, tears in her eyes. But Luis was blinded by his anger. In an act of desperation, he pulled the trigger. The shot echoed throughout the basement, and Valeria fell to the floor. Camila screamed and ran towards her sister, who lay motionless, a red stain spreading across her shirt. "What have you done?" Camila screamed, as she held Valeria in her arms. Luis, seeing what he had done, seemed to wake up from his trance. He slowly lowered the gun, looking at the hands that had committed the act. But he showed no remorse. In his mind, He still believed he had done the right thing. This had to happen. It's for the good of all. Camila, filled with rage and pain, stood up and ran towards him, hitting him with all her might. "You're a monster. You took everything from us." Luis didn't fight back. He knew there was no turning back. Meanwhile, Veronica was returning home. She had forgotten her purse in the dining room and decided to go back before continuing her visit. Upon entering, she noticed a strange silence and decided to look for her family. When she went down to the basement, the scene she found left her in a state of shock. "No. My God, no!" she screamed, seeing Valeria on the floor and Camila crying inconsolably next to her. Veronica ran to her daughter, trying to stop the bleeding, although she knew it was useless. Then she looked at Luis, who remained standing, holding the gun with a lost look. "What have you done, Luis?" she asked, with a mixture of horror and rage. Luis didn't answer. He simply dropped the gun to the floor and sat on one of the boxes, with his head in his hands. "This was the only thing I could do," he murmured. Veronica didn't waste any time. He pulled out his phone and called the police, while trying to calm Camila, who was still clinging to her sister's body. The police arrived within minutes, accompanied by an ambulance. The paramedics confirmed what everyone feared. Valeria was dead. Camila, in a state of shock, was taken to the hospital to be treated for the minor injuries she had suffered during the altercation. Luis was arrested on the spot, without putting up any resistance. During the ride to the police station, he did not say a word. He simply looked out the window, as if he were oblivious to everything that was happening around him. The Perez case became national news, shocking the country. During the trial, all the details of the relationship between Camila and Valeria came to light, as well as Luis' premeditated act to end what he considered an aberration. Camila testified against her father, painfully describing everything that had happened that night. Veronica, though devastated, also decided to testify against him, making it clear that she never supported his actions. Luis tried to justify his act as a desperate measure to save his family, but the jury showed no compassion. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The loss of Valeria left Camila and Veronica scarred for life. Camila, in particular, never managed to fully overcome the trauma. She moved away from San Martin, changing her last name and trying to rebuild her life, but memories of her sister and that night haunted her constantly. Veronica, for her part, stayed in the village, living in a smaller house and avoiding contact with neighbors. She spent her days visiting Valeria's grave and writing letters she would never send, trying to find some meaning in everything that had happened. The Perez tragedy is a painful reminder of how prejudice and intolerance can destroy lives and families. Although Camila and Valeria's relationship challenged social norms, what happened in that house was not only the result of their decisions, but also of an environment that did not know how to confront them with understanding and support. Ultimately, everyone involved paid a high price, leaving an indelible lesson for those who knew their story.